What do the letters A and L mean to you? Well, for most people, they don't really mean anything. But for me and my colleagues, we think of the atomic symbol for aluminum, a strong, usable, and flexible metal. Now, bauxite is an essential mineral in the production of aluminum. And you will find here today that our recommendation is essential in the long-term success of your company, Mr. McCain. So with that in mind, I'll move on to our recommendation. So here, we recommend combining a slope pit mining method, that's right, a slope pit, not an open pit. We'll go over the details of that. A slope pit mining method with the investment from Mimosa Ventures. So that means accepting their $100 million offer and renegotiating the exact details of that royalty payback amount. So this recommendation provides a profitable project. We're going to show you that it is indeed, the Albany mine is profitable and you should be moving forward with it. We'll also show how the slope pit reduces the risk of collapse and flooding. And we received that information halfway through our collaboration here that's a major issue. 10 to 30% increase after our research. That's a major consideration we need to address. And then this recommendation also enables a new relationship moving forward with Mimosa. So I'm going to introduce a problem identification for you here and introduce. Emmett is going to go through qualitative analysis, and Riley is going to go through some quantitative analysis, and then I'm going to conclude the presentation for you at that time. So let's get into our problem identification. So the primary problem for you, Mr. McCain, and Pan Am is you need to raise that $80 million to fund the Albany mine if it's deemed profitable. Emmett will show you that this is indeed a profitable venture. So the total cost is around $400 million. You're getting $320 million from that debt, and so we're looking to raise that $80 million here today. We also want to look at Mimosa Ventures' offer and see if that 2% guaranteed royalty over the life of the mine is actually fair, and we're going to show you it's not and needs to be renegotiated. And then there's a couple secondary issues, like foreign exchange rate risk, mining failure concerns, and those royalty guarantees, which we will address throughout our presentation. So with all of this in mind, I'm going to pass off to Riley, who's going to go through some qualitative analysis for you.
Thank you, Lance. So as you can see here, first looking at the political side of things, the thickness of borders is something we want to look at. So this is the concept that trading from somewhere like Toronto to Vancouver is actually much easier than trading from somewhere like Vancouver to Seattle, because the border adds a lot of cost, a lot of stress that makes it very difficult. So this is something we looked at, as this mine is so close to the port of Hudson Bay, and it makes it a lot easier to ship around the world, and it eliminates some of that expensive trafficking by train or vehicle on land and the ports, and it's really important to that. So as well, policies are moving away from natural resources. Canada is no longer protecting our natural resources as we move towards more of a country focused on innovation and not so much on having to sell our natural resources to compete in the world. And with that, there's easier shipping through Canadian trade routes. Many of the new trade agreements we've seen, such as CETA and perhaps the TPP in the future, are opening up trade routes all throughout Canada that were not previously feasible. And moving on to the economics. So there's currently a very high US to Canadian dollar exchange rate that we've seen skyrocket in the past few years. And this can impact you as you're making all of your revenues in US dollars and then converting them into Canadian dollars. So we want to keep seeing that high exchange rate for you, as well as it means that you're getting more Canadian dollars to pay your employees and keep your business running strong. And the implied distance in trade. So again, this is the fact that many countries seem much more distant. While Canada can easily ship through the port to Europe, it may be much more difficult to ship bauxite to China, something like this, although it may be closer geographically. And sociocultural. So mining is viewed as quite destructive and undesirable. Canada needs to mine, but no one wants to mine in their community. It's oftentimes dirty. Although it does create jobs, it's not looked at as something that people are wanting to have in their community. And with that, the movement away from natural resources. So people don't necessarily want Canada to be always focused on natural resources. We want to be a leader in innovation and tech. And that's moving on to the technological here. So the high versatility of aluminum. You're seeing aluminum car chassis, aluminum cans. Aluminum's in all types of things, such an adaptable and versatile metal. It's one of the second largest produced in the world behind iron. As well, improvements to mining technology. So these are things like automation of dump trucks. No longer do you need someone to sit in that cab. You can have people do it by drone or automatically with programs. Going down into your mine, you're not risking that human life, and you're not having to, it's just a one-time cost of these dump trucks and some upkeep instead of constantly paying people to be in there driving them day in and day out. There's many innovations like this throughout the mining industry. And the environmental. So there's a high pressure on reconciliation. Canada wants to make sure that once these mines are done, it goes back to looking like what it did before. There's not just a giant open pit there. It's filled in and replanted with trees, and this of course comes at a high price to the game. As well, easily recyclable. So aluminum is a very recyclable metal. This is again, when looking at the environment. We don't want to use things that we can't be used again. And illegal. So mineral and mining rights. There's a lot of issues with this about when they expire, what happens and goings on with the mine, as well First Nations treaty and land rights. So this is something to look at. As in Manitoba, it is treaty land, and that's something to look at to make sure that we're not impeding on any of those, or that they could be an issue in the future. So now I'd like to move to our decision criteria. We wanted a decision that matches the maturities with the life of the mine. This is making sure that our financing goes along with our project. As well, limits large one-time costs, like the failure of the mine. Things of that nature that are going to be very expensive and hurt us in the long run. And it reduces risk. So we want to make sure that we're reducing risk and keeping this as feasible and as profitable as possible. And finally, a positive net present value, of course. We want to make sure that this is adding value to the company and will into the far-reaching future. So moving on to that, we went with a sloped pit mine. This spreads the cost of dewatering over the lifetime of the mine. So instead of having these massive costs of having to shut down the mine and fix it in these times when it's destroyed and it's a catastrophic failure, you're investing in more groundwater techniques to bring it out of this slow pit mine. As well, creates greater stability on the side of the ocean. So that's where we're seeing that pressure that's going to cause these failures, and we're creating greater stability so that doesn't happen. And overall, it's going to reduce the risk and stop the production plays. So as you can see here from our NPV surface graph, it's actually a perfect representation of what our slope pit line is going to look like. So as you can see right over here, it will slope downwards to get to that bauxite that we're looking for. So no longer is this just a giant circular hole in the ground. This is going to be a gradual slope down in a more square shape. So that we're looking at that increased stability on the side of the ocean that's pushing in, and it's not going to have those failures that an open pit mine design was. Even if you go with a more shallow, more stable open pit mine, it's not going to be able to beat the slope pit mine. This is shown to be the most effective way of stopping catastrophic failures, but due to the higher cost of often groundwater and the more tilling of the topsoil, it's why it's often not preferred to open pit mining. But because we need that stability, and that bauxite is quite close to the top, it's actually not going to require that much tilling of the ground soil off. So we're able to see still those profits, but we're able to get that stability and ensure that the mine isn't going to be shut down for months at a time. And I'd like to pass off to Emmett for some of our quantitative project analysis.
All right, thank you, Riley. Now, before I get into the numbers of our project analysis, I just want to talk a little bit about risk management and deciding on a project's value. The first is that the main rule of corporate risk management is that we want to take on profitable risks and hedge against unprofitable risks. Now, Pan Am is a mining and minerals company. You're not in the business of trying to bet on currency markets. So for that reason, we actually recommended all our alternatives to hedge our risks with currency futures. Now, we ran a simple regression of the time in the future to the maturity of the the futures contract with the price, and we came up with this general equation. So as we see here, it's 0.000239 times the number of years in the future plus 1.331. That's about what our forward exchange rate is going to look like. So we use this to determine our forward currency exchange rates in the future, and in all our alternatives, we hedged currency prices so we could reduce this unprofitable risk. As well, we want to make sure that we accept positive net present value projects without considering the financing, because that indicates that the project is profitable. So once we determine if the project is profitable or not, we then take a look at the implications and costs of financing to figure out which are the cheapest, and if we can find a way to finance a project and still have a positive net present value. So with that, I'll move into our project net present value not considering financing costs. So this is just a quick build-up of our yearly earnings before interest and taxes. This is just for 3 years. We calculated it for all the years of the mine. This is just for a little visual simplicity. So essentially, we took our realized FOB price, along with our total production and fine revenue. Then we used a 12% operating margin that was indicated in the information you've given us. We used our hedge exchange rate price to take our profits from US dollars to Canadian dollars. We subtracted our head office costs, and then we took away the cost of flooding delay. Now, the initial information indicated that there was about a 12.5% chance of a flooding delay. So that 12.5% chance times the fixed cost added to the lost production ended up being our total cost of flooding. Now, because a slow pit mine increases our flooding costs by about 66%, it was simple enough to just use about 12.5% risk to be a little conservative, or 12.5% chance of flooding to calculate our numbers. Now, as we move here, this is just a data table illustrating the net present value of our project. Over here we vary the discount rate, and over here we vary flood probability. These were indicated in the numbers to be the two major sources of uncertainty in the case. As we increase our discount rate from 7%, it's pretty conservative and probably lower than what we're looking at, to 12%, which is higher than we're looking at. At a 10% flood probability, 10% discount rate, it's about a $446 million net present value. If we use a little different flood probability, if we go, say, 20% flood probability at 10% discount rate, it drops by a little bit just because of that increased chance of flood. So we built a graph right here just for a little visual clarity. As we go along with this axis, the discount rate increases, which is going to decrease our net present value. It's pretty sensitive to that. And this axis right here, as we move this way, it is our increased chances of flooding probability. So again, it shows a little bit of sensitivity to those numbers. Now, moving on, we're going to move into our alternatives. Now, because we've indicated that this is a profitable project, we want to find the way to finance this that's going to be the cheapest for our company. The first is alternative alpha, which is to look at all debt financing. Now, with our 10% flood probability and a 10% discount rate, which we saw, we're looking at about a $292 million net present value. Now, this is obviously lower than the project itself because we do have to pay interest costs. However, it's nice because we do get a little bit of a tax shield. When we look at our net present value surface, we notice it is a little bit more sensitive to discount rate, but we also have a little bit higher value over here because we do get a little bit of a tax shield if we have a little discount, we do get a little bit of a tax shield. So a couple of benefits. It's cheaper than equity financing. Like I said, it gives us a tax shield. We don't have to pay royalties, and there's no real payment fluctuations. Our interest payments are relatively similar yearly. However, this does increase our risk of bankruptcy costs. We could be looked at under monitoring by creditors, maybe difficult to get future financing, and we don't really build a relationship with equity investors. Alternative betas, I think the deal is given. Now, this actually has a negative net present value. This is calculated right here at about a 12.5% probability of flooding and 10% discount. And as we see in this table, it's generally negative across the board. This isn't actually really that profitable of an investment for us, or the deal for us. Again, and net present value surface for visual clarity doesn't really look so good. It's definitely not a situation we want to put our company in. So, there's a couple benefits. I mean, it does get us needed financing. It helps us develop a relationship with equity holder or an equity company, but it leads to a negative project net present value, and that's really not what we want. So, alternative omega is to renegotiate our equity offer. Rather than paying a 2% royalty for the entire life of the project, we actually recommend renegotiating to a 2% royalty for the first 5 years and a 1% royalty thereafter. At about a 10% flood probability and 10% discount rate, it's about a $76 million net present value. Now, that's a little bit less than all debt financing. However, that does come with some benefits. This is going to lower our bankruptcy costs. It helps establish a relationship with equity investors. It gives us a positive net present value, $76 million. And the discounted value of all the payments to the equity investors, the royalties, is about $126 million total. That's a 10% discount. Now, this actually gives good value to the equity investors. They're assuming they invest $100 million off the start, that gives them a $26 million profit after their 10% return. That's huge for the investors, and we think that it would be pretty easy to renegotiate with them. I think that they would definitely take the deal if we gave them a look at our project cash flows, and if we indicated our plan to use slow pit mining rather than traditional open pit mining. One risk of this is that it is a slightly lower net present value than all debt, but we think that the benefits of relationship with equity holders, in case we needed future financing, and our reduced bankruptcy costs, because there are some uncertainties to go alongside weather and rain. We may be looking at costs to repair the mine in the event of a catastrophic weather situation, but it is less probable than with a traditional mine. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Riley. He's going to go through our decision matrix and talk about our recommendation.
Thanks. As you can see here, using our decision criteria that we previously outlined, we gave them weights on the right, you can see. And this represents how important they were in deciding which option to go with. So as you can see, option omega is our best. This has a better net present value, we believe, and it limits large one-time costs. So it's not a huge amount, it's just over the life of the time. And as well, it manages the maturity very well and reduces risk. Not just overall risk for this project, but overall risk for your entire firm. So also with that, our recommendation one more time. We're going to combine a method of valuation to make sure that we are using our slope pit mine and taking that investment from Mimosa and renegotiating in the future after 5 years. Like passed off to Lance for implementation.
Okay, so we have this wonderful, very clear recommendation for you. So how are we going to implement it? Well, we need to go and look at the logistics of that slope pit mine. It's slightly different. An open pit mine is very standard, very concrete. So we're going to look at geological experts, either your own or contracted, to find out the logistics of this and if it's actually feasible, and create a plan for that. We want to purchase that necessary equipment that Riley talked about for drainage, that's managing that water, and then this ties in with those geological engineers and contractors, and then you want to implement that profitable venture. So very simplistic implementation, but when handled correctly, great success in the future. So timeline, we want to authentically discuss the mine and its implications for the local First Nations community. We want to talk about them. We already have the land rights purchased, so there's no considerations there, but we want to involve them in the process, look if they have skilled laborers or people that can help in this mining project and get them involved as a community. We want to approach Mimosa with negotiations. We want to show them the calculations we've done and the value that they are getting out of the current offer and how it's just a little bit too much for them. So we want to adjust that down, like Evan mentioned, from 2% to 1% after that 5 years. Still very profitable for them and helps us out as well. And then implementing this new slope pit design. Those two first ones were the short, we want to address those right away, and then these last two are in the medium and long term. You want to just monitor the costs and requirements of that phase 2, that 300 million, in 5 years. And so just, long-term due diligence there for a timeline. For cost, was that additional cost of drainage and geological experts, and the cost of reconciliation after the life of the mine. You will have to pay that. It's roughly around 30 million usually of a large mine like this. You'll have to pay that at the end of the life, but you need to consider that now. And then there's that increased and development planning cost. So just these costs are all rolling in together. It's more gradual, spread out over the life of the mine rather than all at once. And then for risk and mitigation, we've talked about foreign exchange risk. We can just use 3-year currency futures to stack and roll them all the way over the life of the mine, that 25 years, because it's hard to get a 25-year currency future. So if that 300 million phase 2 project increases in cost, well, we can use this new relationship with Mimosa to discuss those future costs. We want to get them involved, right? This is where that relationship building is coming from and why we went with this recommendation. And then if the renegotiation takes longer than expected, well, you already have the land rights purchased. Those minerals aren't going anywhere under there, so that's not a huge consideration. So, in conclusion, aluminum, it's sturdy, strong, and useful, just like our recommendation. So, I'd like to now open up the floor to any questions you have this time.
If we take your recommendation, what is the actual overall profitability concern?
Yes. And I'll go back a couple slides just to our. This right here is just a simple data table. We talked a little bit about it before. It just shows our total net present value. This is including financing costs. Now, assuming a 12.5% average probability of flooding and a 10% discount rate, which is a little higher than our average. Average is probably 9.5 based on the information we were given. We get about a $75 million net present value. Using a little bit, or just having a look at this based on fluctuations, it looks like it is relatively stable. Between, if we look at a little lower discount rate, it's a little higher. A little higher discount rate, it's a little lower. But we think that your average total net present value of the project should be about $75 million.
With your slope pit mining, would it be safe to say that's going to take up more land space than traditional mining?
Yeah, it will likely take up more land space, but it's not a lot of land space. So the big thing with it is oftentimes people don't use it because it takes more of the topsoil to till off. But because of that length and the stability that you're getting, taking from a circle to a square does add some, but it won't be a considerable amount. It's not like we're going to have to go out and buy acres and acres of land. This is potentially only a small amount, if any, that we would have to purchase. We weren't given the specifications of the size of the land, but we do believe that it would still be entirely feasible on whatever this open pit mine is going to be to do a slope pit mine in the same space.
For some reason, geological or otherwise, the slope pit mining was not feasible. Would that change your recommendation in terms of ranking the alternatives?
We don't think so, no. Now, if we look here at our flood probability, 30% was about kind of the average value we were given, assuming a standard mining operation. Now, at about a 10% discount rate like we're given, we're looking at a little lower present value of the project, about 67 million. So it would slash off about $80 million of value because of our increased costs of potentially having to clean up the mine. Now, it would still preserve our economic alternatives. We still think that renegotiating the equity offer gives us the advantages of developing a relationship with equity investors, reducing our bankruptcy costs, and giving us a little more flexibility in the future if we need it.
The positive NPV of 126 million for investors for the most in that particular case, is it inclusive of like a royalty stream?
Yeah, that actually is that's the present value of all of the royalties. So net of their $100 million investment, it would be about a $26 million net return above a 10% discount rate, which we use because it was consummate with our firm's discount rate.
So when you look at what does it mean in terms of internal rate of return, if you were to be putting yourself in the shoes of
Internal rate of return. It would be, we didn't actually calculate internal rate of return directly, but I mean, if they're getting 26 million net of 10% over 25 years, it's probably looking to be about 13, 14%, if I think of a rough estimate.
And when you're talking about stacking and loading the currency futures, could you detail a little bit what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, currency futures, currencies fluctuate quite a lot over short periods of time. So you would have a future for 3 years that locks in the price of currencies between the Canadian and US dollar for those 3 years. And then when that 3 years is up, you buy another futures contract and you just roll it throughout the life of all the 25, 30-year life of the mine. Every 3 years, you're adjusting that currency, but you're just locking it in.
What's your logic